Hey everybody, it's time for Tech Talk Thursday with no one else than Neil Richmond, the one, the only, the connectable fellow.
Yeah.
And what are we talking about today, Neil?
Well, first of all, happy holidays, everybody. If you're watching it during the holiday season, you might be watching this at another time, in which case, happy whatever season it is. So we are going to dive into text messaging today. We've had a number of questions around it and brought it up a couple of times. And we thought we'd just dive in a little deeper on some of the things that pertain to delivering text messaging and the whys and wherefores. And we'll share a little bit about how we use it and the effectiveness of it and things like that. So that's, I thought, where we'd go today. Find my screen. Problem when you have too many screens, right? So we're seeing the presentation now.
Yep.
All right. So as always, if you've got questions, if you're on, you can post them in chat. If it's another time, you can send them in to Jen through the website directly to us, and that we're happy to answer and help. And that because obviously the point of this is to be useful to adult ed programs when it comes to their technology and some different things like that. But before we dive into that, Jen brought up a good one that is an example of something that's going on right now that we'll start with. Jen got one of those solicitation letters in the mail we were just talking about before we started this, of like paying a fee to secure your domain and that sort of thing. And sometimes emails come with that. Sometimes it's a letter in the mail and that. And I get asked this question a lot about that sort of stuff. And I would say 99.99% of the time it's junk. You can just throw it away because most of the time you're not going to get whoever's got your domain is not going to send you a letter in the mail. The other thing is most domains don't cost you any more than $20 a year. And most of these companies are charging you $200 plus for it. So just an FYI. And by the way, what they are trying to do, the scam of it all is when you pay that, you are agreeing to let them take your domain and you will no longer have control over it. So just something to be aware of today when it comes to the tech world. All these people have gotten smart and done all these crazy things to scare us and all of that. And again, as always, I tell people, if you're not sure, reach out, ask a question, take a picture of it, send it in, and we'll give you an answer on it and make sure that you're good to go on that side of things. But let's jump over to text messaging. What do you think about text messaging, Jen? How do you feel about it as a mechanism to attract students or to engage students?
You know, I always look at my text. Yeah. I mean, I maybe not always like within the first, sometimes I'm without my phone, but most people have their phone on them in some way or shape or form. So it is a great way to communicate. Yeah.
And I'll come back to some numbers here in a little bit because that's an important one to think about. So I put together a little bit of information to share. And again, it's sort of just to sort of help us think through this a little bit and what it should look like. So here's a few of the things that I want to cover with you on this. So first of all, why should you use text messaging? If you aren't doing it right now, I want to talk about that just for a little bit. What are some ways to use it? So let's get a little creative and think outside the box of how text messaging could help you with your program's goals. What are some of the essential elements to include? And then I'm going to give a few recommendations on providers that you should potentially use and some of the pluses and, some of the pluses and minuses of some of those providers there. So, all right, let's launch in. So why text messaging? I think the number one reason that you should be using it is it's the language of our students today. It's the language they speak. Most every student coming into a program has got a phone and is probably connecting using text messaging some way or another with their peers, or family. So let's meet them where they are with this instead of trying to sort of dive around that. So that's certainly the most important thing. So the other reason is this: look at the numbers. It's your best option to reach people. As Jen said, that look, the open rate for email right now is around 20%. And that's if you're having a good day. Many report lower than that on that side of things. But if you send a text message out, open rates are 98%. And look, it takes on average 90 seconds for someone to look at a text message and respond, and 90 minutes to respond to an email. So it's about immediacy. It's about visibility with all of that. And I know that there can be some limitations sometimes around that. Yes, you have limited characters that you can send out, but that's what makes text messaging so useful in the whole process, is people know it's going to be short. And even if there's a couple messages that come out, it's still going to be very short. So open rates is a big reason why to use text message. You're going to get visibility you don't get otherwise. So think about it. For every 100 students you have, would you rather have 20 people reading the message you just sent out, or would you rather have 98 people reading that message? The answer is obvious on that. Another good reason to include text messaging would be about your staff and the hours it takes to play phone tag and be available and all that sort of thing. It'd be good to be able to take that and turn that into more meaningful time with students in the big picture of your program. And then it also makes coming to school less intimidating for students who lack confidence. Because if we're reaching out to make a quick connection at first, they're more likely to feel a little less stress about coming into school if there's some anxiety or something there. And without text messaging, they might never even take the first step in coming in. And so that's an important part of the process as well. It can make us more accessible to the students no matter where we are. And I'm not suggesting in any stretch of the imagination here that you share your personal cell phone number out with your students so they can send messages back and forth and all of that. That's not what I am intending at all with this. This is a really good way when you're using some of the systems we recommend to stay top of mind with your students. Something that's right there on their phone, that's in their pocket or in their hand and always available to them. Okay, so there's a couple whys, and I always go back to the main why, and the main why is 98% of messages get opened within 90 seconds. And that's important when you're trying to communicate and be effective. So how do you use text messaging in adult ed programs? Here are 5 things that we think could be valuable to there. Number one, it is a communication tool. You can communicate program-wide, make announcements in a timely manner. We help some schools do that. And here's a funny scenario that happened last winter. We needed to send a message out to students about school closing the next day because bad weather had come in the evening. And it took us a whole bunch of time to pull together the things we needed and didn't have a good mechanism to share it. So we sent out an email on behalf of the program to the students that they had given us the list of. And when I went back and looked at it, the open rates were horrible on that. And so the communication didn't happen the way it should have as effectively because students weren't going to look in that source. I know that if we had sent out a quick message via text to those students, that would have resulted in much better visibility and response. And as a result of that, we did change direction and get that set up for future use. So number one is communication. You can effectively reach your students in groups as a whole without having to take a bunch of hours of staff time or fear of leaving anyone out. One of the first uses in adult ed that I did with text messaging was doing some follow-up for students who had exited the program. they were using doing phone calls previously and calling every student one by one. About 4 or 5 staff members had a bunch of hours allotted to them to go out and make phone calls. And the sad part was their response rate was pretty low as it was. And when we converted that over to sending out a text message with a link to a page where they could read further and answer some questions, effectiveness went up. And then most importantly, the time committed to that project went down to negligible with all of that. So use number 1 is communication. Use number 2 is follow-up, like I just talked about, sending a text message with some follow-up questions. You can capture some of the critical data that you need from students with just a few quick and easy clicks on their phone. And that makes it a lot more likely that they're going to respond. So that's important. Then there's confirmation. So before an appointment or something like that, you might send a message out asking students if they will be attending their orientation, and they can reply back yes or no. Very simple, very clean, very easy. And you are able to very quickly ascertain who's going to be there and who isn't. And that's an important part of the process as well. We use text messaging in adult ed for surveys. We ask students survey questions in the form of simple text messages that make them very likely to give answers and honest feedback at that point. So it's a good way, obviously not a really long survey, but quick, short questions can be answered that way. And then the last one is referrals. When we're asking for referrals, we can do that via text message and allow students to share a link with a friend, ask them to forward it out to some people. And with using a text message, much more likely that students will do it. And it's likely to be more effective because of that. So it's a great way to do that mechanism as well. So there's 5 things: communication, doing follow-up, asking for confirmations, asking survey questions, and generating referrals are 5 ways that we've been able to make use of text messaging as a tool for adult ed. So let's jump over a little bit to some things that are helpful when it comes to putting together text messages. This is important as well because you want to be succinct, you want to be effective. So we've learned a few things through that. Number 1 is timing. You got to make sure that your messages come in at the right time of the day for people. And, obviously not everybody's on the exact same schedule, so you have to factor that in. But you want it to be at an effective time for them. And I would say early mornings are probably not good, but we've found evenings or late afternoons to be really good. Sometimes mid-afternoon. In fact, we do very little text messaging in the mornings. We find that later in the day is better. But we're also mindful to typically for us, we try to shut down any sort of messaging going out by 8 o'clock in an evening. But we've also found that weekends can be really good time to capture students and get them to look at text messages and so on. So part of it is about working out your audience, but part of it is knowing some of the important times. The next thing is length. You got to make sure you're brief. Now, this is a fun one for me because I'm usually pretty succinct with things, and I do work with some people who like to write a book when it comes to a message, and so it's my job to edit that down sometimes. But making sure they're brief so that the students will read them and that there's enough information in there. Yes, it can be a challenge for educators to put it succinctly, but typically most messaging has a limit on how many characters. So that's an important part of the process too. But you can go into multiple text messages, and I always try to say, let's keep it under the 160 characters where we can. If we absolutely have to, we can go past that. But here's the challenge. Sometimes it's just way too much. So what do you do then? Well, you put a link in. so they can go over to a page on a website and read all the information. Not as effective, but still more effective than other mechanisms. And then you need to be mindful too that the link you put in the text message is not really long, because what you're doing is eating up your space. So it's just something to think about with that whole process. There's a service called Bitly, bit.ly, that you can sign up for free, where you can put a link in and it will give you a short link of that you could use in a text message. My warning on that though is this: when you use Bitly, and I love it and I like to use it, the problem is people look at it and sometimes they don't know if it's a spam link. And so that's a caution I would throw out with that. Whereas if you were to use your adult ed domain as a link, they would know that it's authentic on that side of things. So you have to be careful and decide what makes the most sense. But if you have a really long domain, that you need to think about something different, maybe finding a short one to use for things like this. So anyway, that's a question we can have for another day, or you can feel free to ask if you want to dive in on that a little bit more. So timing and length. And then so the next thing that we need to factor in is wording. Make sure your messages, and I'm talking about the content of it here, are easy to understand. They've got to be free of like any ambiguous or program specific language or acronyms that would confuse students. So think about it when you write it. How would this sound? And here's a good test to use for this that we do is we send out a test message to a few key people for them to look at to give feedback, who don't have all the context necessarily, so that when they see it, they know, oh, okay, this makes sense, or no, this would be a little bit more helpful if you did it this way or something like that. So there's another one to consider. And then frequency. Make sure you don't send messages too often. If you do, students will opt out. And if they opt out, you're done. You can't keep sending them messages at this point. And that would be a bad thing to have happen. Or they will just tune out. When they see that come in, they'll go, nope, don't need it, and go on. So make sure your timing is good, your information is relevant, and that you're putting out a good time of the day. And you'll definitely help yourself to be effective when it comes to using text messages. All right, last little thing that I wanted to share is what are some recommendations or best practices when looking for providers on this? And, you know, there is a ton of choices out there. We're in the same boat on this, looking for solutions in some cases. So let me talk with you about a couple of things to think about, and then a few recommended providers. So here are the factors. Number one, how many messages are you going to use a month? That's number one to think about. We find that a larger adult ed program tends to use about 2,000 to 3,000 messages a month, using it as a reminder system and a little bit of the lead generation, bringing people in the door. But a smaller program might not even use 5,000 a year. So you need to factor that in as you're looking at solutions and seeing costs and that sort of thing. And then, do you need the messages to be one-way communication, meaning you broadcast them out, or do you need it to be two ways where they can respond back to you? You need to know that going in, because that would change who's available to you as well on that side of things. Then you've got to think about how user-friendly is the platform, because some are really user-friendly, some are not, some are very complicated and difficult to use. And you want something that'll be easy and user-friendly. And then, of course, you've got to factor in the cost. There, to my knowledge right now, and I would love it if somebody could tell me that I'm wrong on this, there are no really good solutions for text messaging that are free. I'll cover the one that many know and use, and some of the pluses and minuses about it, but there really is very little that's free. And so I hate to say this has something you're probably going to have to invest in a little bit, because it's an important part of the process. But it also, you've got to work out, a good solution to it. So let me talk you through a few options. the other thing you've got to work out is who's going to be the admin account holder. Because we've had a situation where everybody got locked out because the admin was no longer there. They weren't able to reset the password because that email account was no longer in use. So you got to think about those little pieces as you plan this so that you don't get stuck down the line on that side. All right. So here's one that we really love and we use probably more than anything. It's called Easy Texting. And you can just Google that to find a link for it. What we like about it is it's very easy to use. It can be quite reasonable. You can pay, I think, like $25 a month for a basic account, and then you'll pay 4 cents for every message from there. So for small quantities, it can be quite useful, and we use it in a number of scenarios. Very easy to upload or even copy and paste and drop phone numbers in and then categorize them. That's an important feature that has to be available to you. So you know if this is an ELL group or a specific registration date or something like that, so you can direct messaging specifically to them. And it's also easy to see reports with this. So that's one that we would recommend. One that Textedly is one we used to use and recommend, but they made some changes. They made an update to their software. It made it much more difficult to use, but it is cost effective. And it is still a very good solution. It's just not the most user-friendly solution that's out there. So that's something you've got to factor in with all of that. And you don't always see the reporting is minimal with this, but I didn't want to kick it out completely because there are some benefits to it. And it is, I think, a very affordable solution that you could be using on that side. So the third one is called Calling Post. And I know this one, not from the texting side, and we didn't really bring this up, but they have a feature where you can do the mass, you can pre-record a voicemail that will then go out to everybody on your list. That could be an effective way at times, but I know a lot of people who store up voicemails and don't listen to them. But they combine that with texting, and you can put groups in and do that. Reporting is pretty simplistic on this, and the pricing for regular use of it could be a little bit cost prohibitive, but it is an option, and it does provide you with the ability to upload students into the system, number one, and then two, you can either do a voicemail out or a text message. So that's a nice option to have with them. Then the one that many of you would know is Remind. Many use this, but it has some limitations on its usability. We would love to recommend this as the primary one, but a solution like Easy Texting is so much more user-friendly to send messages out to students and to regularly engage with them and that sort of thing from a program perspective. I think for individual teachers and small groups, Reminds really can be a handy tool. And of course, it protects your phone number. You know, and I know it's a free solution, but I also know there's a few things that they've changed over the years with it. Easy Texting that we like to use and recommend with our clients is a paid solution, but I think the advantages of the ease of use, you'll end up saving probably because of less frustration and greater flexibility with it in the big picture of things. And then, of course, Connectable, we have some texting solutions as well within our student information system that we build, which is very exciting. New product that we have. We do the enrollment side of things, but we now have a student information system. You're able to do text messaging on a one-way path out to students in groups or individuals or different things like that. So if a student's been missing class for a while, you're able to send a message to them either via email or text messaging through our platform, which is a pretty cool side of things too. So we have that. We don't have a full robust text messaging solution yet, but within our systems, we do have the way to communicate with students through our platform as well. So wanted to make sure that you knew that. So, well, that's about all I got for today. It's not a big, massive topic that's going to take hours of presentation or anything like that. But I wanted you to think through some of the things. There is an advantage that 98% just keeps sticking in my mind. That we have 98% possibility of people seeing the important stuff you want to send out. That's huge right there. The next big piece is how you're going to use it. And we like to use it in a lot of different ways to engage students into the mix. And then, of course, if you're looking for a standalone solution that has really checks all the boxes, Easy Texting does that. And of course, we have that included in our platform as well. So questions? Any questions, Jen?
I don't see any in the chat yet. So in summary, the Easy Texting textedly, calling post, remind, and then your connectable education system are the mechanisms that you use or you recommend, or the programs that you recommend. And
there's probably other good ones out there. We just haven't tried them enough to be able to say, yeah, that's the way to go on that side of things. So that's the only difference there. But we do know, I get asked this a lot. Which one do you recommend? Well, we know what we use regularly.
Yeah, I rolled out in the last newsletter to try to get IAACE members to sign up for text messaging. It did not happen. The way the newsletter has been this past couple times, I think, is part of it. But the other part, of course, was we were at about a 30% open rate for the past newsletter.
Which is better than average.
Yeah. So not too bad, but we changed the membership system to where you put in your mobile number and you have an opportunity to put in an office number as well. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and it's sort of ironic we're using email to try to get texting into effect.
Yes.
With that sort of thing. You almost need the text to get texting.
Exactly.
It's also like, so we utilize it in registration. We collect people's cell phone numbers to be able to do the text messaging and that sort of thing. So we're gathering those, but it takes time sometimes to build up that, like when you have to go out and gather them, it takes time. That messaging has to be heard time after time.
I mean, I honestly, I think it would just be a great way to communicate about our conference is the main thing that I see being able to utilize it for, because getting the word out to everybody at conference on certain things is so difficult. You make announcements after announcements and not everybody's in the room, or, they weren't paying attention, whatever. But I think that just the open rate in general for text messaging, that it's probably a marketing no-brainer. You should be trying it.
Yeah, it is. And look, I mean, there's lots of things that we can put in the mix here, but sometimes, most all systems have a mechanism where you can type stop, hit reply and type stop to not get them anymore. I think people know that. So sometimes, we might be excused to allow for, forgiveness versus permission with all of this. And especially in the scenarios that we are using it, people have expressed interest in a program and they can opt out. And that's really the big laws when it comes to any of this. They want to know that that's available.
Well, a lot of the restaurants, I can't remember the program that some of them are utilizing around here, but a lot of the restaurants, you opt in with your mobile number and they send you deals and coupons and.
Yep, we could have the adult ed deal of the week.
Yes, A
I don't know
little
what that would
coupon.
be. A little coupon.
Free classes.
Free. Yeah.
Oh, they're always free, but here's a
Yeah,
free
yeah.
coupon.
Woohoo. Get an extra 20% off your HSE this week.
There you go. I think it sounds like a great idea. What about you, Polly?
Maybe 20% off of your Tech Talk cost.
Ooh, there you
There
go.
you go. Come on.
20% of zero is
Yeah,
still zero, but hey,
still a good
people
deal.
are in for a sale.
Still a good deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, you know, more and more, if we're thinking about, I think what we have to do is open our thinking to how do we capture that data up front and have it available to us. So when we want to, we can utilize a solution like this versus having to go back around and get that information. Those are the differences in terms of the thought process, I think, on what has to happen in order to make it more useful and effective in that. So yeah, so anyway, that's a bunch of information about text messaging that could be useful to you at some point.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the information, Neil.
Yeah, no worries.
And with that, we will close out the official recording, and we can stay on for more questions if you like. But that's it for today's Tech Talk. Check back real soon for January's.